All right, it is 7 o'clock, so it's time to get started. Thank you everybody for coming this evening for lecture 8 in this series with Duane, all about the history of the Gunnison Country. Thank you, Duane, for doing this series with us. I've been, of course, learning a lot, and we've been getting a lot of great feedback from other people learning a lot as well. I want to remind everybody that you can make a donation to not only support this program, but also to support a scholarship, the Duane Vandenbusche Education Scholarship, which will go to a local student to help them go to college. To make those donations, go to crestedbuttemuseum.com and find the tab that says support us. So again, you can find all the information, crestedbuttemuseum.com, to make a donation, or feel free to call us at 970-349-1880, and we can do it that way as well. This portion of the series is being recorded, as has the rest of the series. You can find all the other recordings at crestedbuttemuseum.com. We've got a great YouTube channel going now with more fun videos too. So check out what else is there. There's great short films and oral histories from Red Lady Films and Natan Bilo, as well as a high school student, Gage Meredith. We're going to be adding more as we make more. So be sure to check out our YouTube channel as well. Again, crestedbuttemuseum.com to find all the links to all of Duane's past sessions. Please consider becoming a member to support the museum. Memberships not only go to programming like this, but it also makes sure that we take care of our collections and make sure that we can create education kits for kids. It means that we can also take care of our historic building. Memberships go a long way, so please consider becoming a member or making a donation. Also, we're doing a series of walking tours. We've got regularly scheduled historic walking tours every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 a.m. and every Saturday at 3 p.m. The regular walking tours go up and down Elk Avenue and then finish off in the museum. Then we also have one more themed tour this summer with Russ Lawyer, all about railroad history. The last one is August 29th at 10 a.m. is what we ended up scheduling those for. 10 a.m. Saturday, August 29th, all about railroad history. And Russ is a great historian, also a student of Duane's, and is always very interesting. Tonight is the second night that we're trying out closed captioning on our PowerPoint. I discovered last week that the closed captioning is kind of funky and it spells things very interestingly. So please stick with us through that. If it is a real bother, please do email me if you just hate it, and we'll find another way to do some closed captioning. Finally, before we get to some trivia, I want to remind everybody that the film festival is coming, and there are two historic films that are going to be shown that include photographs from the museum collection. One of them also includes interviews with Duane and many other local historians. One is by Red Lady Films, and it's called High Country, and it's all about the mid-timers, the folks that came in the 60s and 70s. And then the other one by Buttery Agency is all about mountain biking. It's called The Birth of Dirt. I've seen the rough cuts of both, and they're fantastic. I can't wait to see them in the virtual film festival. So be sure to go online and check those out. Finally, when we get to the trivia, Duane's got 3 questions for us. I want to remind everybody, in order to answer these trivia questions and to be considered for a prize, you must put it in the chat box, so not the Q&A, but the chat box, and it has to be addressed to all attendees, all panelists and attendees, not just panelists. It won't count. So you can find that down in the lower right-hand corner, the blue drop-down button there, and find all panelists and attendees. Now, I apparently am having a difficult time talking tonight, so I'm very happy to hand it over to Duane for the trivia.
Thank you, Nell, and thanks everybody for being on again. I appreciate it very much. Here are the 3 trivia questions, and we got some really good prizes. Prize number 1, and I'm going to put the book up, is a book on Lake City done by Grant Houston, the editor and owner of the Silver World, and myself a year ago. That'd be prize number 1. Prize number 2 is a 1-year subscription to the Lake City Silver World newspaper, compliments of Grant. And prize number 3, which you can give to anybody if you're out of town, 2 free tickets to the Mountaineer Theater in Lake City, and that's compliments of Phil Verdon. So here are the questions. You can answer any one of the 3 and do what Nell told you to do so you get them in. Question number 1. I want 3 mountain ranges in Colorado that contain 6 or more 14,000-foot high peaks. 3 mountain ranges in Colorado with 6 or more 14,000-foot high peaks. The second question. This river flows 1,250 miles and starts above Lake City on Spring Creek Pass. And question 3, name one of the 2 men who pioneered in alternating current electricity first used near Telluride in 1891 in the world. So any one of those 3, you get over to Nell. The topic next week is going to be a very interesting one. When I first came here, a lot of people told me that there was no way that you could raise any agricultural produce or farm because the growing season was too short. Next week, we're going to prove that is a lie. And we are going to talk about farming in the Gunnison Country and sustainability in the Gunnison Country. And it'll be a very interesting lecture and one that a lot of people don't know about. So we hope you have you aboard. Today's Lake City and the surrounding area. And I'll start off by saying that Lake City, one of the most beautiful towns in the United States, is located at 8,671 feet. It is 55 miles south of Gunnison, and it's right where 2 streams, the Lake Fork of the Gunnison River and Henson Creek, come together. Now there's a good shot of Lake City in the very early years, and we're not too far from where those 2 rivers come together. Today, it is the county seat of Hinsdale County, and it is one of the 2 least populated counties in the state, along with Mineral County that has Creed as the county seat. Hinsdale County has 3/4 of a person per square mile. That town was once known as the metropolis of the San Juan, and very early it was larger than the other great mining camps of the San Juan, larger than Telluride, Ouray, and Silverton. Lake City is in the Colorado Mineral Belt. And there you're looking at Lake City and Gunnison Avenue in 1880 when the town really got started. But it's in the mineral belt, the Colorado Mineral Belt, and that is a mineral belt that runs from Caribou near Boulder in the north all the way to Silverton in the south. The belt is 250 miles long, 50 miles wide, and runs in a southwest direction. And every precious mineral town in Colorado is located within that belt, with the exception of the greatest of them all, and that is Cripple Creek Victor, where the ore comes from an extinct volcano. So all the towns, Caribou, Georgetown, Black Hawk, Central City, Silver Plume, Nevadaville, Breckenridge, Aspen, Leadville, Monarch, the Gunnison Country, Creed, and all those great towns of the San Juan, they're all in that mineral belt. Lake City is also dominated by 5 majestic 14,000-foot San Juan mountains nearby: Wetterhorn, Uncompahgre, Handy, Sunshine, and Red Cloud. The Ute Indians were the first inhabitants of the Lake City area. And there you can see them in their lodges at the Los Pinos Indian Agency in the 1870s. But because of the harsh climate and the high terrain, they were never permanent residents where Lake City is today. They were usually just passing through in the late spring, summer, and early fall, hunting game and gathering seeds and berries. The Spanish were the next people into the San Juan area and around Lake City. Juan Oñate came through that area and in Española, northern New Mexico, as early as 1598, trying to set up a settlement where the Spanish could maybe connect their mission stations out with the mission stations in California. And then in 1609, Oñate was directly involved in establishing Santa Fe as a mission station. And that is the oldest town in the American West. 1609, Santa Fe, New Mexico. The Spanish gave names to the area, like San Juan, which means St. John, and Rio Grande del Norte, which means the Grand River of the North. Spain found very little free gold by panning, and they soon realized that most of the valuable metals in the area were mixed with other elements and would be very complicated and expensive to get out of the other elements. That's called smelting. And they soon left. They never really stayed in that area very long. Spain's short involvement with the Lake City region was followed by the fur trader or the mountain man. They worked their way north out of Santa Fe and Taos into the area. Some of the men had names we remember: Kit Carson, Old Bill Williams, Antoine Robideau, who built Fort Uncompahgre near today's Delta. And you can go to Delta today and still see the reenacted fort that they have recreated, Fort Uncompahgre or Fort Robideau. Jim Baker was also in the area, along with Uncle Dick Wooten. One of the infamous trappers of the area was a guy named Cannibal Phil Gardner. He was from Philadelphia. Once Gardner and his Indian wife were caught in a driving blizzard in the San Juan. Gardner survived, and when he came into a trading post, he threw the leg of his squaw down on the ground with the comment, "There, damn you, I won't have to gnaw on you anymore." Other trappers said this about Gardner: "Never walk in front of Gardner in winter conditions." Placer miners were the next people who came into the Lake Fork and Henson Creek in the 1860s, including Charlie Baker, for whom Baker's Park was named. Baker's Park today is Silverton. Silverton would be named by a miner named Jim Kendall, who in the early 1870s made his way into the middle of Baker's Park and yelled to everybody, "Hell," he said, "we got silver by the ton out here." And they took the silver and the ton and they put it together, and hence the name of Silverton. 9,318 feet on the banks of the Animas River, deep in the San Juan. With gold and silver being discovered in the San Juans and around Lake City in the early 1870s, the United States made a treaty with the Ute Indians who owned the land. And that treaty was called the Bruno Treaty, named after Indian Commissioner Felix Bruno. The treaty, which the Ute Indians were pretty much forced to sign, gave the U.S. the San Juan area, 60 by 75 miles, which the miners had already really occupied. With the Ute Indians moved out of the San Juan, the area was now ready to welcome the mining rush. And the real start of Lake City began with the building of the Saguache to San Juan toll road in 1874. In that year, the town of Saguache tried to capture the trade of the new San Juan mining camps from nearby Del Norte. The two great road builders were hired: Otto Mears, who would soon be called the Pathfinder of the San Juan, and Enos Hotchkiss, who you're looking at right there. They were hired to build from Saguache through where Lake City is today, and then up Henson Creek and over Engineer Pass at nearly 13,000 feet into the great silver camps of the Animas Forks, Eureka, Howardsville, and Silverton area. In November, Hotchkiss, leading a road survey party, discovered rich gold in what soon would become the Golden Fleece mine. Following that discovery, many of the road builders quit to look for gold. However, Enos Hotchkiss did not. He built the road and then he went on to ranch in the North Fork Valley of Colorado, and today the town of Hotchkiss is named for him. Weeks after the find, Lake City began, named for nearby Lake San Cristobal. That lake had been formed, according to geologists, around the year 1270. Around that time, the side of a mountain gave way above Lake City because of leaching, roared down the mountainside, hit the lake fork of the Gunnison River, and dammed it up, creating the lake. Now you can see the Slumgullion slide right there, and it still moves anywhere from 7 to 21 inches a year, and a little more in other areas. And it's yellowy, and it was called Slumgullion after the yellow feature of a soup that the miners ate during that time. In the same year that Lake City began, the Hayden Survey arrived in the area, part of a scientific study of the West. And there is Lake San Cristobal. And that picture was taken by William H. Jackson, part of the Hayden Survey in 1874. Two of Hayden's men, Franklin Rhoda and H.W. Wilson, climbed Uncompahgre Peak and then Sunshine Peak. And on the top of Sunshine Peak, an event occurred that shocked them, but was typical of the Colorado mountains in a storm. Rhoda wound up writing 7 pages about it in his report. And there they are, and they're actually on Salton Peak above Silverton. And here's what Rhoda said while they were on Sunshine Peak, quote, "Lightning had struck a nearby peak and electricity had been discharged. Almost before the sound reached us, the tickling and frying in our hair began. We were electrified, and we started as fast as we could over the loose rock down the side of the peak, but it scarcely got more than 30 feet from the top when it was struck." Now, when I read that, I remember as a very young man coming here in 1962, I was out with a skier named Jerry and Sarah Davis, and we were out the north end of Taylor Park, and we hiked up to Tellurium Lake to fish. And the fishing wasn't very good, so I hiked up above the lake to Tellurium Peak, nearby Tellurium Peak on a ridge. And here's a guy who knows nothing about the Colorado Rockies. And a storm began to move in. And all at once, buzzing came in my hair, and I thought, what is going on here? Do I have high altitude bugs in my hair? And I scraped my hair. And then I looked down on my arm, and I had my parka on because it was cold, and I saw a spark go from the elbow to my wrist. And even though I didn't know what was happening, I got my ass off the pass very quick, because I was electrified like Rhoda and Wilson were, and that storm was coming in with electricity. In 1874, one of the most sensational stories in Colorado history occurred near Lake City, and this was the saga of Alfred Packer. Packer was born in 1842 in Pennsylvania, and there he is on the top, and we'll hold that photo for a while. As a boy, Packer suffered from epilepsy. He served 8 months in the Army of the North in the Civil War before being discharged because of it. He came to Colorado Territory after the war, mining in Georgetown, then working as a jackwhacker, and he drove ore wagons for a time. In 1873, he was in Provo, Utah, and there he convinced 20 other miners to go with him to a new gold strike in Breckenridge in Colorado. All of the men went together because of Indian danger. Packer also told the men he knew the San Juan very well and the region around Breckenridge very well, and he also knew of a shortcut to the camp. In late January, the 20 men made their way to Chief Uray's Indian camp near Delta. Chief Uray tried to convince Packer and the men not to travel from his camp because the winter of 73 and 74 was one of the snowiest and toughest that he had ever seen. However, Packer convinced 5 others that he knew the way to Breckenridge and that they could make it, and that they would get a jump on other miners coming into the new gold camp. The men who went with Alfred Packer were Shannon Bell, Israel Swan, a 16-year-old boy named George Noon, Frank Miller, and Jim Humphrey. And they left Chief Uray's camp on February 9th, 1874, into a mounting snowstorm. And that was the last time anybody ever saw any of them again except for Alfred Packer. 66 days after leaving Chief Uray's camp, Packer walked into the Indian Agency at Los Pinos near Cochito Pass. And he told the agency head, Major Charles Adams, that he had become snowblind and hurt his leg. So he had been left by his party. And when they didn't come back, he wandered for many weeks with no food but berries and an occasional rabbit or squirrel. He said he didn't know what happened to the others. He thought maybe they had made their way into Baker's Park near Silverton. One of the Indians standing next to Major Adams looked at Alfred Packer and he said to the major, "Him too damn fat." And Alfred Packer did look pretty good for a man who had been wandering in the wilderness for 66 days without much food. However, Alfred Packer had a lot of money and many possessions that really were not his. He was trapped in many inconsistencies, and he finally told a different story. He said that 3 men had died of hunger, and they were cannibalized, and then Shannon Bell, who had gone insane, killed Israel Swan, and Packer had to kill Shannon Bell in self-defense. And yes, said Packer, I did take meat from the bodies with me, and here I am at Los Pinos. Packer, however, because of suspicions, was lodged in the Saguache jail until an investigation could be launched. On August the 20th, 1874, John Randolph, sketching scenes for Harper's Weekly magazine, found the bodies high above Lake City at a place that would soon become known as Cannibal Plateau. They were decomposed, and he found them because of the terrible smell. On the same day, by coincidence or not, Alfred Packer escaped from the Saguache jail and was not seen again for 9 years. 9 years later, in 1883, Frenchy Cabazon, who had been one of the 20 men with Packer in Provo, walked into a bar at Fort Fetterman, Wyoming, and saw a man who was calling himself John Schwartz. Cabazon recognized him as Alfred Packer and got word back to Lake City, and Alfred Packer was arrested and brought back to stand trial. When he came back, he told another story. Packer said that he went out looking for a route to safety, and while he was gone, Shannon Bell had gone insane and killed the other 4 men, and Packer killed him in self-defense. Alfred Packer was tried in the Lake City Courthouse, which was built in 1877, still there today. And he was convicted on 5 counts of murder. Judge William Gary gave an eloquent judgment, but Saguache saloon keeper Larry Dolan ran into his Lake City saloon and gave a now famous version of what the judge said. And Dolan said this to everybody in the bar, and I'm quoting, "The judge says, stand up, you voracious man-eating son of a bitch, stand up. There were 7 Democrats in Hinsdale County, and you man-eating bastard, ate 5 of them. Damn you. I sentence you to be hanged by the neck until you're dead, 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 as a warning against reducing the Democrat population of this county." Now, it's my duty to tell all of you folks listening tonight that Hinsdale County has never voted Republican in its history. And as a Democrat, when I go into Hinsdale County in Lake City, I'm packing heat. 45 revolver, I'm just kidding there. Alfred Packer was sentenced to death, but his sentence was overthrown because at the time he committed the crime in 1874, Lake City was a territory and did not have a death penalty. And you can't put a man to death for something that was not a death sentence at the time it was committed. So he had to get another trial. And this time, in the next trial, he couldn't be tried for murder because of double jeopardy. He'd already been tried and convicted for murder. So this time, Alfred Packer would be tried in Gunnison in 1886 on 5 counts of manslaughter. And he was convicted on all 5 counts and sentenced to 8 years on each one. 40 years. Sentenced and convicted and put in Canyon City's penitentiary. And there he lasted for 15 years before a Denver Post reporter named Polly Pry got him released. And he was released because the only evidence they had on him was circumstantial. And Packer really was the only one who knew what happened. He lived the rest of his life in Littleton, and he died there in 1865 in 1907 at the age of 65. He's buried in the Littleton Cemetery. Now, if you folks go to the University of Colorado's cafeteria, you can get yourself a nice juicy hamburger with relish and ketchup and mustard on it, and it's called a Packer burger. When I think of Alfred Packer, I think of the great story told by Robert Service in The Cremation of Sam McGee, which went something like this. There's strange things done neath the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest we ever did see was the night on the marge of old Lake Labarge. We cremated Sam McGee. Right around the time of the Alfred Packer incident, this was 1882, one of Lake City's worst crimes occurred in April, when a man named George Betts, who owned a combination dance hall and brothel, and an 18-year-old boy named James Browning killed Sheriff Edward Campbell during a home robbery. Betts was the guy who fired the shot that killed the sheriff. The two men were arrested shortly after and lodged in the Lake City jail. At midnight, a mob stormed the jail, took the two men to the Ocean Wave Bridge, and hung them. Their bodies were left hanging for another day as a warning to anybody else who might think of engaging in robbery or murder. Sheriff Campbell left a wife and 6 children. The Hinsdale County Courthouse flew its flag at half-mast, and all public buildings were draped with black crepe in honor of the sheriff. In 1876, Lake City was booming. 2,500 people in the town, great mines with names like the Golden Fleece and the Ute Ulay and the Black Wonder and the Hidden Treasure. It was also on the Sawash to San Juan toll road with Barlow and Sanderson stages carrying passengers and jack trains carrying ore. However, in spite of Barlow and Sanderson, the greatest freighter of the area was a man named David Wood, legendary for moving freight from the end of railroad tracks to the towns of the San Juan, including Lake City. In one day in 1881, he hauled out 400,000 pounds of ore and moved 100,000 pounds of supplies and equipment in. Fantastic at that time. On the bottom of the picture, folks, you're looking at the bones of those 5 men that died with Alfred Packer when their bodies were exhumed in 1989 to see if people could figure out really what happened to them. Back to David Wood, who became a household name in Western Colorado. He had money, large warehouses, the best wagons and drivers, the best stock, and was totally dependable. He became a legend on the Western Slope, akin to the great Ben Holiday, the legendary man of the West. And I'm going to tell you a little story about Ben Holiday. This was written about by Mark Twain in a great book called Roughing It. And Mark Twain wrote about a old man, religious man, visiting the Middle East back in the 1880s. And about a young man named Jack who had once ridden one of Ben Holiday's stages. And Jack and the young man got to know each other. And the old man said to Jack, "Jack, you see that range of mountains over yonder that bounds the Jordan Valley? The mountains of Moab, Jack. Think of it, my boy. The mountains of Moab. We are actually standing face to face with those illustrious peaks. And for all we know," dropping his voice impressively, "our eye may be resting at this very moment upon the spot where lies the mysterious grave of Moses. Think of it, Jack." Jack said, "Moses who?" The old man said, "Moses who? Jack, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. My Moses, the great guide and the soldier and the poet and lawgiver of ancient Israel. Jack, from this spot where we stand to Egypt stretches a fearful desert 300 miles across. And that wonderful man brought the children of Israel, guiding them for 40 years over those rocks and hills and landed them at last safe and sound within sight of this very spot. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing to do, Jack. Think of it." Jack said, 40 years, 300 miles? Why, hell, he said Ben Holiday would have had him through there in 36 hours. Who the hell's this Moses? He couldn't have run a wagon train. In addition to the great mines and the toll road, Lake City became the county seat of Hinsdale County, named for the Lieutenant Governor of Colorado Territory, George W. Hinsdale. It also had the Crook Smelter. And there you see the Crook Smelter, located south of town by a huge waterfall. That smelter got coal for its power via an 88-mile wagon road from the Richardson coal mine in the Gunnison Country. And there you can see the blast furnace, one of the largest smelters in the American West at the time. One more thing was in the offing, and that was a railroad. And the Denver and Rio Grande had one planned from Saponero on the main line, 36 miles into Lake City. More about that in a moment. The Lake City Silver World newspaper began in 1875. First paper in the San Juan. And Grand Houston continues the tradition today in 2020. A new courthouse was built in 1877. It's still the courthouse today. In 1876, Presbyterian minister George Darley and his brother Alexander built the Presbyterian Church, the oldest church on the western slope today. Still there, still services on Sunday. Darley would recall his experiences in the region in a great book called Pioneering in the San Juan. And in it, he recalled skiing over Engineer and Cinnamon passes, almost 13,000 feet in the winter to mining camps. He also had a heart. When a Lake City man died of alcoholism, Darley insisted that the coroner's report say to the family that he died of pneumonia instead. The great days of Lake City were from 1874 to 82. Winter sports were popular. Skating on Lake San Cristobal, sleighing, skiing were some of them. Miners on Engineer Mountain skied down to the Frank Huff mine to Rose's cabin, 3 miles in 15 minutes. Target shooting, roller skating in the Opera House, now the Armory, drinking contests, drilling contests, baseball, boxing were other activities. Jack Dempsey from Manassas in the San Luis Valley fought in Lake City and would soon become the heavyweight champion of the world. Susan B. Anthony came to Lake City in 1877 and spoke for 2 nights on behalf of women having the vote. John Crook, who owned the Crook Smelter, left Lake City and invented tinfoil, becoming a millionaire. The Lake City Beer Garden opened in 1878, a half-mile up Henson Creek. It had tables and benches and rustic walks and swings. Beer was served, dances were held, polkas were played, and people sang songs like "Wait Till the Sun Shines, Nellie," "Down by the Old Mill Stream," "When You and I Were Young, Maggie," and "Wait for the Wagon." I'm sure all these songs are known to the people listening tonight. Probably more of you have heard the Eagles or Pure Prairie League. Amy, what you wanna do? You remember that one, I know. 3 boats took passengers out on Lake San Cristobal also at that time. And Lake City was the largest town in the San Juan in the 1870s with a great red light district with 29 saloons, along with gambling establishments, one of which featured the famous Poker Alice, who could hold her own in poker games with anybody. By the early 1880s, Lake City began to slide. It had low-grade ore. The railroad was delayed, and the weather and cost of transportation were problems. The Lake City branch of the Denver-Rio Grande Railroad, keep that on up there for a moment, Nell, was graded out 36 miles from Saponero to Lake City. There is the high bridge about 7 miles out of Lake City. Now, I had a good friend who was an 8-year-old girl way back when. Her name was Betty Steele. And she was hired by the railroad at 9 years old. When that railroad crossed the high bridge, she would walk that high bridge over 100 feet high along the rails with a bucket of water and sand to pour on the ties to make sure that cinders didn't catch that bridge on fire. Later on, she married a guy named Frank Wallace and became Betty Wallace. And I know Juan Diaz and all my Venezuela connection remember her fondly. And Betty Wallace wrote the original book called The Gunnison Country. And she was a great mentor of mine. And I tried when I had my own book, trying to figure out a title. I couldn't come up with one. I walked over to Betty one day and I said, Betty, would you mind if I use the damn title, The Gunnison Country? She said, you go right ahead. I've given many eulogies, but when I gave Betty's eulogy, that was a tough one for me and I almost couldn't finish it. She was a great lady, one of the best we ever had in the history of the Gunnison Country. And if you can imagine her 9 years old walking over that bridge. Around Lake City, the railroad did not arrive until 1889. And there is the Lake City Depot. The Rio Grande would run until 1933. And we can put the next photo up, Nell. And there is the last train out of the Rio Grande, May the 25th, 1933. Lake City didn't have the ore, transportation a big problem, and they couldn't make any money, so the last train is going out. Around Lake City, satellite mining camps opened up. Up Henson Creek, the little camp of Henson opened up at the Ute mine 6 miles up. And there it is, the Ute mine, a great gold and silver mine. 3 miles further up, a town called Capital City was located in 1877 by George Lee. George Lee wanted to become the state capital, and he built a famous mansion out of brick, which was made there and included a theater, guest bedrooms, and a ballroom. Next photo. And there is the Rose Line Kiln, located at Capital City. The population soared to 800, but when the Lake City boom ended, most people moved away. Next photo. And there is the Lee Mansion, made out of brick. And that little building on the left was a conservatory where his wife raised exotic plants. And that building stood for a long time before it came down. Capital City, 9 miles up Henson Creek. Rose's Cabin, next place up, just below Engineer Pass. There's the restaurant, started by Cordillon Rose, 1874. Rose built a combination stage stop, saloon, stable, and hotel with 22 rooms. It was halfway between Ouray and Lake City, and freighters and travelers stopped there before assaulting the pass the next day. It had the longest bar in Colorado and 22 rooms. From Lake City along another stream, this one, the Lake Fork, you went by Lake San Cristobal, and then a series of mining camps with names like Carson, 4 miles up the Lake Fork. Next photo. And there is Carson right on the Continental Divide. One part of Carson was on the eastern slope and another part of Carson was on the western slope. 4 miles up Wager Gulch, which ran into the Lake Fork. 4 more miles up the Lake Fork was the great town of Sherman and the Black Wonder Mine. And there's Sherman. And finally, White Cross, and then Cinnamon Pass and the headwaters of the Animas River. And there's a great shot of Sherman in the 1870s. A side light on the lake on San Juan County, Silverton is the county seat right over Engineer and Cinnamon Passes. Out of 3,143 counties in the U.S., it has the highest mean elevation of all of them at 11,240 feet. With 638 people living in it, it, with Mineral and Hinsdale County, is among the least populated in Colorado. and the nation. The silver panic of 1893 and the falling price of gold marked the end of the great days of Lake City. But it had one more ace to play. Mike Burke, who owned the Ute mine, tried to revive mining when gold prices rose in the 1930s, and he came up with a galloping goose San Cristobal Railroad. He used Denver and Rio Grande tracks, and he put a Pierce Arrow automobile body with an 80 horsepower Buick motor to pull ore and cattle and freight. It only lasted a few years, and there it is. Pierce Arrow automobile, Buick engine in it. It was called a galloping goose because the wheels never fit right on the rails. They were automobile wheels. So the left wheel would hit the left rail and ricochet. And the right wheel would hit the right rail and ricochet. And the thing went down the tracks ricocheting like a galloping goose. And that thing operated from 1933 to 34. East of Lake City by 52 miles and located outside of Slum Gully and Spring Creek passes was Creede, the last great silver town of the San Juan. And Cy Warman, a great newspaper editor of the Creede Candle newspaper, wrote a famous verse about it. And it went something like this. Here's a land where all are equal, of high or lowly birth, a land where men make millions dug from the dreary earth. Here the meek and mild-eyed burros on mineral mountains feed. It's day all day in the daytime, but there is no night in Creede. The cliffs are solid silver with wondrous wealth untold, and the beds of running rivers are lined with glittering gold. While the world is filled with sorrow and hearts just break and bleed, it's day all day in the daytime, and there is no night in Creede. So, here is Lake City today, town of 400, brand new $14 million school through the 12th grade, ski area with a Palma lift and 300 vertical feet of skiing, one of the top ice climbing areas in the nation, the Mountaineer Movie Theater, a great pub crawl every August, surrounded by 4 high mountain passes, 5 14,000-foot high mountains, a great museum, and with a fantastic history as the metropolis of the San Juan. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. Now, go to your chat room. I'm going to go to my chat room here if I can dig it out. Hitting chat. I want to hear everybody that I know.